Welcome to the Feral Trade Cafe. This is the first cocktail hour talk of 6 that will be taking place during the week. It's a bit of a misnomer because it won't be quite an hour because we're late starting and there's no cocktails. But there will actually be, I think Tom is going to pass around some grappa, which isn't technically a cocktail, but it's leaning in the right direction. And Kate's going to tell us in a minute the story behind this grappa and who makes it. But first to introduce myself and Kate. My name is Simon Preston and I'm the director of the Eat Newcastle Gateshead Food Festival, which in previous years has taken place in May, but this year will take place in June. And I've been asked to come along really just to introduce Kate and to facilitate a talk and discussion with her, to learn a bit about the Feral Trade Cafe, what it is, and Feral Trade, what that is, and how I think a 7-year journey has brought you here. The reason why I have been asked to do this is I have been minutely involved in helping Kate to bring this cafe together, but Kate and I first met about 2 years ago when I was putting an event together for the Eat Food Festival, and it was an event which was around fair trade. And back then I thought, well, fair trade, that's fantastic, isn't it? Fair with a capital F, trade with a capital T, great thing, no one can say anything else. But I was looking around for some different angles on it, something to make it a little bit more than two-dimensional. And I heard of Feral Trade through a friend, didn't know what it was, looked it up on the internet, found Kate's website, which had less to it back then. Tracked down Kate after some difficulty and some reticence, I think, from Kate, who didn't want to be winkled out at that stage, and managed to pin her down for a meeting in London when she very much fleshed out the fair trade thing for me and made me realise there was much more to it and many more ways to look at it than the very sort of singular way that I was doing. And I think that will help, that will become clear as Kate explains how feral trade sprung into being. So that, I think, introduces us. I said to you about the first time I met Kate, and I also just wanted to tell you about the last time I met her, because it's that was my real picture of feral trade. And I was, again, travelling through London. Kate and I needed to meet to discuss something she was doing down there. And she said, oh, I'll meet you at St Pancras Station, which I thought was as fine as any place to meet, but didn't realise why. She was sitting at a little cafe table outside one of the cafes there, with a big piece of cardboard with Feral Trade written on it in pen. There it is. And I thought this was odd because I knew exactly who she was. I didn't need the time, but it wasn't for my benefit. In fact, it was what I was about to witness was a transaction of one of the curries coming through, and it was actually the couscous, which you can see over there, which comes from Morocco. The parents of the woman who had introduced Kate to this product had been to visit her from America to Morocco via London, and were travelling across London to in their transit from Luton to Glasgow Airport, and we stopped them in St Pancras and opened up the suitcases and offloaded all of the products into Kate's bags. And it was just such an odd and strange and brilliant scene. Everyone involved thought it was fantastic and loved it. It made me feel even more excited about feral trade than I already was, and much closer to it. And that's that. So at this stage, I think I'll just say to Kate, just tell us a bit about why she perceived the need for feral trade, because it isn't really something, Kate, is it, that you dreamed up because you needed a project. It's something that came about because you had a dilemma.
Okay, so I started feral trade back in 2003 when I was working, as I still am, at the Cube Cinema in Bristol, which is kind of like the Star and Shadow, but in Bristol, volunteer-run venue. And at the time I was the bar manager there. And I was trying to find a good source of coffee for the bar. And if you can see in my exhibition up there on that shelf, that's the product on the left, is the coffee that I ended up with. So I was looking at the fair trade products on the market, because, you know, like when I started at the Cube, they were drinking instant coffee and then Lavazza, and then this idea, you know, we should be thinking more carefully about where we get this from. And I looked at the fair trade products available, and I started to find them very disturbing, because they all had this picture of a farmer looking happy, holding up his product, and saying that he gives the money from the fair trade for his children's education. And my thoughts were, why is it my business what he does with his money? You know, should I, you know, if he uses the money to buy PlayStation, is that a moral judgment I should be making on him? You know, it's none of my business. And also, he's got no way of finding out where I get my money from. So it's not actually fair at all. It's a one-sided transaction where you get to look at the farmer and make these decisions, and he's got no access to you. So looking for a practical alternative to that, I thought about, okay, what is fair? My social networks, you know? It's like the way you behave with friends. It's negotiation. You don't sort of imply conditions on people. Generally, I don't with my friendships and on my social acquaintances. And I also thought of the way you behave at the farmer's market, or you know, even the corner shop. You don't go in there and start like, so what do you do with your money, young man, to the guy in the corner shop. So I just was thinking of what are real equitable models where you're actually in a kind of equal footing relationship. So I decided to try and use my social networks to try and source products as if I was at the farmer's market, but things that we don't have at the Bristol farmer's market, like coffee. So to cut a long story short, through an artist friend whose sister was working in El Salvador in the US Peace Corps, I managed to make contact with a coffee cooperative, and they never exported before the roasted product, and I'd never imported before, so it was this amateurish sort of 3-month thing on both sides, and I started importing and using it at the Cube, but then also realizing that there were a lot of my friends who would be interested in buying this through the same means, and I started using my social networks to distribute along. Social and professional networks, you know, there's no holds barred, you know, like I sell the coffee to my friend who makes this glass, who sells it to his bank manager. So there's these chains of, you know, it goes way outside my social circles and way outside the cultural sector. I did not do this as a deliberate project or a deliberate art project, but then I started getting more and more interested in it and feeling like, oh, I could get a lot of ideas and a lot of experiments into this context, so that's how it kind of drifted into being an art project. And then, of course, the range of products naturally expanded when I kind of thought, oh, it would be good to have tea, or, for example, this grappa that we're drinking right now, actually 2 varieties of this. For some reason, I found 2 people who made green walnut grappa. So it was a really kind of rare thing. One of them is a colleague, Maya Kosmanovic, who was going to be speaking next Sunday, but unfortunately can't come, has been replaced by the equally fascinating Witzka Mas. But she's a artist based in Brussels, and her parents in Croatia, her father's died now, but her mother still does it, produce this grappa. They get the raw grappa spirit from their neighbours through a barter system, and actually her dad, in the time of the war, was unable to get work because he was Serbian, he's a physicist, and started bartering his computer programming skills for grappa. So there's a whole history in there that you could go endlessly into. And they infuse the grappa in their kitchen, in their high-rise flat, and distribute it to family. And so it goes to Brussels, and then, you know, so I have this kind of like, it's not commercial, it's not social, just on the edges of it's kind of homemade, but it's almost home manufactured because of the scale it's made on. So these are the products that I'm interested in that are outside of commercial systems, and are actually very common and quite familiar to most people, but trying to sort of articulate those systems that they're made and delivered in. And by a strange coincidence, some of you are drinking the other grappa, which is from Palo Alto in Silicon Valley, where the friend who actually put me onto the coffee, one of her former art students, is making this grappa gathered from walnuts from trees around the IT industry. Completely different story in that one, and the grappas have both come together for the first time in this place to be trying to understand. So those are 2 of the products from the range. Every product has a story. I might just mention at the moment the tea, because for that one is for me one of the most interesting products that I have at the moment. It's the tea from Bangladesh, and it's the tea that's being served here for the next 10 days. It's a really delightful, organic, Darjeeling style tea, just delicious. Grown in not just organic but permaculture and actually Ayurvedic principles, like very sort of rarefied, careful farming. If you look over there, there's a poster that relays the story of the tea. And so I found this tea in Bangladesh when I was there on a residency and got interested in it because there weren't many organic products in the shops, right? So it seemed it stood out. And I went to visit the company headquarters and found out that, and they were in this really glossy high-rise building, and I found out that the company had made its money manufacturing concrete electricity poles. And this immediately got my attention. And that there was somehow something very interesting in the convergence of these two industries, particularly as I picked up a bit of a story through friends there about some involvement of the concrete electricity pole manufacturers in a lot of high-end government corruption. So there seemed to be a lot of things converging in this tea. And I went and visited the tea estate and toured around it. And you can that poster is it's actually like a scenario. I made a video and then I've actually turned it back into a poster. So you can read the story of the tea through that, where you end up in it with a lot of really conflicting narratives around land ownership, land use, farming, and the production of traditional herbs, and then the extraction of all possible resources from the land and from people who work on it. That is not very easy to resolve story, actually. It's something that I don't even have a conclusion on, except that it's vast. And so I really, I felt, wow, I just was looking at this tea and I've ended up with this story that covers like land degradation, government corruption, the electricity network in Bangladesh, the cement industry. It's all inextricable from the story of the tea. So I'm very interested, this is the other aspect of the project, which is trying to return these really complicated life-sized narratives back into a product when you consume it. So instead of a very kind of digestible story about how delightfully these things were grown, you have a delightful product that comes from troubled origins and no real resolution to that. I'm not sort of passing judgment on a product. I'm mainly passing judgment on whether they're exciting and good to consume. But it's so much more engaging when you're engaged fully as I try not to use the word consumer, as an eater and drinker in the chain of relations that brought your product to the table.